So we'll begin with our prayer for teacher-student. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astoma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy and vigor. May our studies be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So as usual, I'll mute my microphone and await your questions.
Hi, Swami. I have a question. What does winter solstice mean? And can it have, I'm sure this is a yes, but how can that affect to oneself?
Yes, so thank you. So it's the winter solstice, which is a very special evening. So what is the significance of it? Well, almost from time immemorial, ancient people have marked the various seasons and the movement of the sun, as it were, from north to south. And today, of course, is winter solstice. It's the shortest day of the year. We won't notice how it lengthens from there on. But we know that the ancient people had some acute understanding, although we're not quite sure exactly what it was. So, for example, the Neolithic people in Ireland would have constructed something that is today called passage tombs. And there's been a revision on the meaning of it, because it is not necessarily a tomb, but it is certainly a construction of about 5,000 years old. And it is constructed in such a way that the front of it is built a kind of window, and exactly at the winter solstice, the sun rises and its rays enter into that window and light up a passage inside. And in order to view it, you actually have to have your name drawn from a lottery. So popular is it, people from all over the world will come to see it. And external to that, on stones, we find various markings, various patterns. Most popular pattern would be something like a spiral, and people speculate that this really represents the sun. So the sun itself is very significant. Now, I suppose people who were of the agricultural bent would understand and go to so much trouble in building these things that the sun and its seasons and the astronomical bodies around would have a significant impact on agriculture and therefore food. And it's easy to see, to marvel at the sun. I often think, when we look toward the sun, it's the same ancient sun, moon also, that was seen thousands and thousands of years ago. Even some 4 billion years ago, same sun was there. Same moon was there. So it's a remarkably ancient thing, and we take it for granted. The sun is significant for this reason, because it is the object of worship everywhere in ancient civilizations. It is understood, of course, that the sun is a life giver. That is very obvious straight away. And if we want to be more scientific about it, it is the rays of the sun which are captured, the photons of it are captured by plants and the leaves of plants in an operation called photosynthesis. And it is not quite understood exactly how that happens, although quantum theory is evoked in terms of it. But it's an ingenious thing. You and I can't do it. We can only get the benefits of it, the effects of it. And so the movement, the shift of the sun's movements was registered in the ancient Indian days as being two different routes. The passage of the sun in its northern part and its southern part, going toward the south, indicating brighter days, is an afterlife avenue for those people who are not going to the ancestors, not being reborn again, not being born in heaven, but going into the higher levels or the higher regions of existence. Let's call it the world of Brahma, where in this world they have the opportunity to move on to entire realization and liberation, of course, or to be reborn as a great soul and, and for the benefit of others. On the other hand, the northern path was seen to be the path of the ancestors or the path of the mains, where we would enjoy the fruits of your activities, of your karma, your actions, and then ultimately be reborn in a suitable life form that will enable you to continue a journey based on the seeds that you sowed yourself. And every creature would have this, every creature that has a conscious will go through the same process. Of course, all creatures have a desire, whether it's known to them or not. And the obvious example, of course, in the evolutionary progression will be some creature seeing the competition of food and being a leaf eater will look at the lush leaves higher up and will need to develop a longer neck for it. And so the theory goes that the next generation will have a longer neck, until we find a giraffe is able to eat the top leaves. And the whole nature's ecology will be supporting it, because the cropping the top leaves will also enhance growth, overall growth in the tree and so on. So the northern path and southern path, these are expressions for an afterlife route toward progression and sometimes, of course, toward regression in the whole advancing cycle of life. Honoring the sun is very ancient. All the attributes we give God, we give to the sun. It's a life giver. It knows every corner. Its rays spread everywhere. It is omnipresent, omniscient. It is radiant. It is beautiful. It represents for us some bright light that we cannot replicate on this earth. And when you see the furnace of the sun, whose brightness is there, it looks as if it's self-effulgent, but it's not. And the ancients were careful to point out that there is something that lights the sun. Look to that which lights the sun. Now in yoga exercises, postures, there's a wonderful religio-physical exercise that can be done called Surya Namaskar, a salutation to the sun. Done properly and slowly, every physical movement accompanied by a bija mantra will be a mindful exercise in devotion. And I'm just seeing, I'm distracted a little bit because it's southern winter. No. You're traveling to the north. You can see away from you can look at it like this way, away from the equator, nearer the equator, put it that way. It has to do with the tilted axis of the earth, tilted at 21 degrees. So it's the southern path and the northern path, yes. So I see that as the great significance of the winter solstice, among other things, marking the shortest day. And you see, very often the ancient people would take the worst conditions possible, the shortest day, the darkest days, and that would evoke a sense of worship in order to mitigate against what is seen to be the most unfavorable circumstances. This is seen in the tradition of Ekadashi days also. So this progression, this movement of the sun is seen to be the chariot of life, if you will, rushing across like a swan, rushing across the sky, if you want to put it like that. and replicating our own jiva, our own soul, that is also running in hopefully in a progressive direction. I'm not sure what else to say on this, except that in spiritual life, we should really take every single opportunity that they have for redirecting the course of the mind, redirecting the course of the attention. We always have to remember one fact, that the only part of life we can control is the local thing, that is this body and this mind. And so therefore, we will have to have a grip on it and manipulate it when necessary. And so this body and this mind, we can train to respond to favorable conditions. And wherever unfavorable conditions are there, we put extra effort in and change the course of our thinking, and therefore change the course of our destiny and change the course of our environment. It's a necessary thing to do. The opportunities are endless. The sunrise is an opportunity. The sunset is an opportunity. The awareness of your breath is an opportunity. The mobilization of the body and its capacity to move and stretch is an opportunity. The eating, the necessity of eating is also an opportunity, given with the mind given a right direction toward it. The encounter of a friend is an opportunity. The encounter of an enemy is an opportunity. All encounters are an opportunity. Opening the eyes in the morning, we have to do it because the person who normally does it, maybe on holiday, is an opportunity. Peaceful moments throughout the day, these are opportunities. And the ancients would have recognized, certain times of the day will have certain moods. And this is reflected, for example, in the Christian liturgy. In the Christian liturgy, we see that these 5 times daily prayer, matins to start with, so a period where we are anticipating the rising sun representing the risen Christ in Christianity. And now this gives rise, of course, to another kind of solstice, and that is the spring solstice. But of course, we have no knowledge of when Christ was born. We don't know exactly what season, but we do know there were great, great celebrations around this period of time of the winter solstice. The Divine Mother, Holy Mother Sharada Devi, was born on the winter solstice, pretty much. And we also understand that Sol Invictus was a great ceremony to do with Sol Invictus around about December. And early Christianity took advantage of this and made a big celebration and registered it, or re-registered it. Originally, Christmas was on a different day, re-registered it to be in December. And it makes a lot of sense. Somebody once asked me not too long ago, so you have Christmas trees, what's the significance of Christmas trees? And I said, well, as far as I'm aware, the Christmas tree or the fir tree is an evergreen tree and reminds us of eternal life, everlasting life, something that never really changes, and something that evokes life, a sense of life, something that is vibrant and living. And so that's what it represents. And when we decorate it, we are honoring or making sure that it is a specially decorated way of celebrating an everlasting life. So there's great significance in all these traditions around the winter solstice, including the season of Christmas. And all the lights you can see. You can say that all the decorations and all the lights in the cities that you see and small towns are really orientated around the winter solstice if you trace it back. I'm not sure if there's much more I can say on the subject, so thank you. Can you tell us about suppressing versus sublimation of our tendencies? Thank you. That's a very good question. Okay. Well, firstly, suppression and repression, let's call it the same thing, is never healthy and is never recommended by any psychologist. No psychologist will tell you, please repress your memory. They'll say, please access it, at least that much, and then make it useful to you is the next step. Making it useful to you is called sublimation. Sublimation, seeing something that is normally dismissed as ordinary and elevating it in a different way to see its deeper nature and its deepening nature until finally we come to the conclusion of what it is. And that process is called samyam. Samyam is normally associated with a process of concentration or meditation. But if we take it in an informal way, our whole life can be a kind of meditation. The problem is we don't really observe things properly. And when we allow the mind to go off on its own and make a master of it as opposed to a slave. Let me give you an illustration. There are some children, some small children that are well behaved because they have a good example to follow. And their free choice is a little limited with an element of discipline buffered with kindness, where kindness is overwhelming. Kindness, appreciation, and correction, or what we might say, coaching for improvement. Now, that's a proper way to bring a child up. Mainly, they learn by example. So, the contrast to that will be, please do as you want and give a child some choice. Do you want this or do you want that? Well, a child is full of whims. And to give it a choice like that often results in a little indiscipline. And we have all seen children, I'm sure, that know how to manipulate the adult by displaying inconvenient tantrums and so on. Same thing with the mind. We also see it with dogs or with other animals. You train a dog. You have to train the dog to follow you slightly behind. If it surges ahead, you want to pull it on the leash until it understands you are the leader. And your leadership then should be followed. Same thing then for the mind. We have to lead the mind in such a way that it doesn't become discordant and it doesn't become temperamental or indisciplined. And it is only this avenue of the conscious mind where we'll be able to control the unconscious mind, but we do it by elevating it. It's called sublimation. You take a tree, or the examples I've just given, the sun, the tree, etc., and you see it is not just a tree. It's a display of divine glory when looked at properly. It can be the object of supreme concentration leading to meditation, because everything that is in this world, when you look at it properly, will lead you back to its origin. And its origin is only one. And our philosophy calls it Brahman. So we have to learn the art of skillfully guiding the mind in an artistic way, an artful way, to the glory of the Supreme everywhere we look, so that we don't suppress the senses. We guide the senses. We suppress the senses and say, under the guise of discipline, this is asceticism to the extreme and is condemned in the Bhagavad Gita. It is that form of tapasya which is tamasic, that is punishing the body or torturing the body. The fools do it. You torture the body thinking that you are increasing your spirituality. Of course, you may be increasing your willpower if it's not done with a sense of frustration. But the body, after all, itself is an expression of divine glory. Why should we torture it? And so the Bhagavad Gita very sensibly says, no, don't torture the body. Of course, Buddha also discovered that. He discovered this extreme asceticism and replaced it with the middle way, and goes back to his former yogic companions. And they see him eating, and they say, what a terrible sin it is. How can you possibly dare to do this? And he replies, no, I'll show you there's a middle way. The middle way is the body requires food. Eat. But eat, don't, you eat to live, you don't live to eat. That's the difference. Same thing with all the examples of the senses. You don't repress them. The eyes, instead of seeing some evil, you say, let me close the eyes or knock the eyes out. No, the eyes are designed to see the beauty and glory of what is in front and around. This is the beauty and glory of the great, great mystic Ramakrishna Paramahansa, because he was an unusual type. He enjoyed the whole of life. Swami Vivekananda, when challenged by the atheist Ingersoll, no, I enjoy life. I'm not suppressing it. I have learned to squeeze every drop of the orange of life. And where does the extra enjoyment come? It comes from seeing that extra dimension, as it were, that leads the mind toward adoration, and therefore thankfulness and joy. It is that thankfulness and joy that comes out and elevates the mind and leads it higher, whereas suppression drags you down into constraints and frustrations. It's a negative way that doesn't understand the value of the body and the mind and the senses and what they see and what they experience. Ramakrishna enjoyed a circus, he enjoyed the zoo, he enjoyed museums, he enjoys theaters, he enjoyed people's company of holy men, and so on. Oh, please keep me here, because I still want the pleasure of God's company. I still want the pleasure of singing his glories and his name, and I still want the pleasure of the company of jnanis and bhaktis. A very different approach. No sackcloth and ashes in this way. Vivekananda famously said, if you see a man with his chin down by his knees, I'm paraphrasing, is not spirituality. More than likely, the man is suffering from dyspepsia. So that is the difference between suppression and sublimation. Then another question is there. Why is there the northern star on top of the tree? Is it a subconscious way to inspire us? If you take it like that, yes. The idea of putting a star, of course, the star is the Christian symbol that says, from the story of astronomers or astrologers even, visiting, we think, from ancient Persia, and following as an astrological sign that says, okay, something special, some special birth is taking place. So that is why that star is put on the top of the tree. But of course, yes, it could be the North Pole Star. What does the North Pole Star tell us? Well, you see, we can now talk about Prasada, we can talk about Dhruva and the story of Dhruva. But the North Pole Star is the one star that seems absolutely fixed for all time. Navigators will use the North Pole Star to tell them where the North is. And so there's a story around that, about its fixity. And the story is the story of Dhruva. So what does it tell us? Yes. If we are as stable and the mind is as concentrated as the North Pole Star, then we are in the right direction. Because concentration is really the key to so-called salvation. Concentrated mind that is gathering all the forces, physical and mental, and once having gathered them up, directing them in a systematic, scientific way that becomes a revealing thing. Like a laser has a great power, is just gathering all the photons together and beaming them at higher energy in a certain direction. and it can cut through steel. So the power of attention is like that. And it is a method of revealing the truth about an object or about a situation when there is no need for any external instruments. This is the power, for example, that Einstein had in his thought experiments, and how day and night cogitating on a single problem, such as gravity, and understanding that gravity is a kind of acceleration. That is, if you hold a bottle of water up at a height and punch some holes in, the water will obey gravity and spurt and fall. But when you drop the bottle, the water stops. In other words, the water is accelerating upwards. And he saw that. He was very keen to do that, and endlessly mulling over these problems from an unusual angle. We have the luxury to do the same. Our difficulty is we are conditioned, and we accept our conditioning, to only think in a set way, and we don't like change. But it is only when we change the course of the mind and the attention that we get some kind of revelation. And it's an exciting journey because we can understand and learn new things every day, every moment. We have the opportunity to see things from multiple directions. It's called the relativity of perception. You look at it from one angle, then there must be 100 other angles to look at it from. And when you shift your view, a different aspect of that same thing becomes revealed. And so this fixity of mind is really a lazy way, a lazy excuse for not investigating things properly. In contemporary arguments between people, theists, for example, and atheists, there's one particular atheist, Peter Atkins, who's a chemistry professor, and he's become one of the champions of the atheist cause or the neo-atheist cause. And he says, you see, the problem with theists is they're just lazy. They just say, God did it. Well, it's a kind of caricature of the experience, the deep experience, the mystic experience of the spiritual endeavor. It is simply taking a crude theology, a kindergarten theology, and making fun of it and arguing against it with crude arguments, equally crude arguments. But you see, when you look at things properly and investigate them properly and do it with an element of concentration, it reveals many, many secrets. There are great scientists today who are full of honors and full of praise and who have high reputations, who are taking the severe problems of modern physics. There are severe problems in this modern age because we have not made any progress in the world of physics for something like about 40 years. And when that stagnation happens, we know we have something of a problem. And one of the problems is that there is too much flexibility, if you like, for thinking that everybody can be an Einstein without the concentration with it, loosely postulating this and that, most of which cannot be tested by the experimentalist. So these ancient people, without any instruments, were able to pierce through the outer coverings of things to the inner truth of things progressively. And their revelations are astonishing to us today because they are all contemporary revelations. They're all actually endorsements of some of the truths that we have or are experiencing in modern science with no explanation. And the ancients had an explanation, and probably we should follow them and see if we shift our intention, can we come to at least an understanding of how they viewed things. We take, for example, what is called the hard problem of consciousness. It's a phrase that is put out by the philosopher, the Australian philosopher, and he has brought this about as a very popular phrase, the hard problem of consciousness. It's not a hard problem. When you ask, who knows when this problem is arising, and who is aware of your meanderings and attempting to find objective solutions to the problem, then the relentless pursuit of who knows it, phrased differently, who am I, who am I, who am I? Sri Ramana Maharshi relentlessly asks this question, who am I? And doesn't stop until he gets an experiential answer. So it is this penetrating concentration, that results in a yielding vision of what is true inside everything. And so this is the meaning, this can be the meaning anyway, of the North Pole star. And that's how it's taken in the stories of Dhruva. Another question arises. When reading about others' lives, if we find common things with the life that we live, does it mean that we are meant to follow a similar path? Well, not necessarily, because there are many inspiring lives, and the lives are the effects of certain practices on certain paths. And everyone will have their individual structure, their individual path, because they have their individual talents and abilities and personalities. And we are all constitutionally different. So not necessarily. But we can see the lives of these great saints and great souls. And then we can selectively say, I think I can follow this, I think I can follow that. Now, Ramakrishna was unique because he followed just about every avenue you could ever think of. But he said, you see, referring to the monetary system of India, 16 parts are there, honors are there. You need not take all of them. You can take a few that are suited to you. This is what is behind Guru. Because a Guru will have the capacity, a competent teacher, has the capacity to guide you individually along something that suits you in particular. And so we have to take that. Swami Vivekananda understood this, and for that reason, he made several Advaita ashrams dedicated to non-dualistic practice. But not everybody will follow non-dualistic practice. Many people will want devotion. Now, when we see that most saints that we know of, East and West, will follow a path of devotion, love of God, well, that's fine. But if we follow some of those practices without the subtle components, then we find that we drag the mind down to dependency. In other words, we weaken the mind. Swami Vivekananda's language, we could even become howling fanatics. So we have to be very careful and discriminatory in our practice, and the guidelines will be scripture-based, will be inspired by those great souls, will be according to directions of a competent teacher, and according to your own assessment and understanding of your own personality too. And this combination will create a unique practice for yourself. Don't use my broken ladder. Construct your own well-constructed ladder and move on. So I hope that has clarified that question. These are good questions, by the way. Thank you. You see, this is why we do the Enneagram. We understand the personality and psychological differences between one person and another. And so broadly speaking, we know that somebody who is intellect-based may have to have a different style of meditation. We'll have to avoid the traps that are there from people who are living in the head, namely endless thoughts and analysis, thinking about thinking, and not really getting to the reality of something that requires a mobilization of other things such as the willing mind and the emotional mind as well. So very soon it will be Christmas. Do you think something new and unexpected can happen for you, for us, for mankind? I certainly hope so. But every second is new, and the next second depends on what we ourselves put into it. You see, there's no fatalism in the Vedanta philosophy. We don't think that there's a fatalism at all. We think that thought moves faster than sunbeams, and crafting our thought creates a matching environment in the universe of people and places and events. Is entirely up to us. Is there any merit in group thinking, that is, group prayer? Yes, there is. When people are mobilized en masse, then the power, the thought power, if you will, becomes a lot stronger, a lot more directed. So community prayer, there's a lot to be said for it. Now, spontaneously, Christmas, whether you are Christians or not, Christmas has an air of generosity, has an area of kindness and goodwill and so on and so forth. All of those things are there. And this was most dramatically evidenced in the last century, in the First World War. People started the fight in August, and they thought that by Christmas it's over, by December the whole thing is finished. But it didn't, as we know, it dragged on for 4 long years. But it was that first Christmas where the spirit that I'm talking about rallied itself, and the German troops came out of their trenches, and the British troops came out of their trenches, and they shook hands, they exchanged presents, they made friends, they showed each other family photos, and they even played a game of football. And this lasted, I don't know, maybe a week or something. So it shows that we can change the course of life and history. And of course, they were supposed to be at war, so the officers got to grips with them and said, okay, enough, please go back to your trenches. If you do this again, we're going to shoot you. You should be shooting at these people, not shaking their hands. But this is the transformative effect that we have the capacity to undergo. It's a tremendous gift that we have, where we can transform this discord into harmony at will. And it's all dependent on us. Our thought will model our behavior, and our behavior will model the world, and it's entirely up to us. Entirely. There's no fatalism. By chance, will it happen? No. Will we make it happen? Yes. Nobody says we have to go to war in such a way that civilian property is damaged irreparably. And in some wars, with no names mentioned, what will the gain be? Rubble, disaster, and refugees and sorrow. Well, what good is that? That's foolishness. And after a few years, relatively speaking, 50 years, 100 years, they're all gone. 2 devastating world wars were there. Millions of lives lost. And cruelty, and for the first time, I don't know if it's the first time, but chemical weapons being used in the First World War, mustard gas, and both sides using it, the Germans starting it. A new kind of warfare was there without any real honor within it. And then things like the Blitzkrieg, or in the modern days, missiles that are technologically accurate. They are zoned in onto certain target areas and targeting civilian populations of power plants and apartments and so on. For what end? See? So it is astonishing that in this First World War, this Northern Hemisphere, and in a world where we have all this wonderful technology, that this technology is used for destruction. Well, we have an inner technology of the mind. We can mobilize our thought. And when we read about these great astras, these great celestial weapons, we can only think that these were mantras. That is, that these were beams, laser beams of thought that had a destructive component to them and could be used in a constructive way also. Constructive way used by the yogis, destructive way used in a selective way, so that military targets alone were the object of the necessary defense, or a war of justice, say. But now there's no justice in it because civilians are being targeted. Two types of war, and neither justified. One is terrorism that targets the vulnerable, the innocent, the weak, the civilians. And the other aspect would be firing long-range missiles that have such destructive force that civilians are displaced in their millions. There's no excuse for it in a sophisticated, advanced, so-called civilized environment today, in my opinion. I think you'll agree with me. But we have the capacity to change it. And particularly today, where we are faced with possibilities of nuclear devastation, because technology has allowed us to develop this, the power of the atom. So we need to begin this transformation by changing the way we think and looking at things with a positive outlook, and not allowing our mind to be dragged down by the obvious bad news all around us, because it means we have missed the glory that is contained in the body and mind, is contained in your domestic environment, is contained in your country, is contained in your social conditions, and is contained in your health, and is contained in nature in the form of trees and flowers and sky and clouds and the wonderful cosmic arrangement that makes advance possible in the spiritual evolution of man. So I'm looking for other questions and I can't see them. So,
Swami, can you repeat what you said of the significance of, I think it was the southern, which is now the winter?
the significance of?
I think it's the southern. Let me see. No, the northern is now the winter solstice. You said there were two different ones.
Yes, yes, yes.
And it was the ancestors. I think you said. I understood the other one,
So
which is transformation.
It was thought that there is a direction after death, and the description of the direction is in the language of symbolism. That is the world of the sun and the world of the moon. And so the idea is that, when we repeat the Gayatri mantra, for example, we're taking 3 of the 7 worlds which are available above and below. Now, coincidentally, we have 7 levels of progression, 7 levels of regression in terms of psychology and psychological therapy. And so we can easily mark out the DSM significance of a regression. So anyway, there are 7 worlds. Okay, Bhu, Bhuva, Swaha, Tapaha, Janaha, and so on. All of those, 7 of them are there. And then 7 worlds below of regression. Naturally, we want the progression. Change your thinking now, you'll get it. Get your freedom here and now. Don't worry about the worlds. They'll all disappear. You have your freedom. What we call the worlds is just a structure. And it's made from time and space, made from causality and function. And so, in terms of our supreme goal of freedom, all these worlds have no place. All these worlds are irrelevant. And so, as I say often, in this world, much better to invest in a one-way ticket rather than return ticket. And the worlds that we go to, these are to provide for our effects, the effects of our actions. We don't cause any more causality. It's only we're enjoying. It's like saving up for a holiday, spending it all in a holiday camp somewhere in the Bahamas, but you have to come back and save again for the next year. Well, rather just buy a one-way ticket, a permanent one-way ticket, and don't come back. Now, supposing you come back, then the law of causality or determinism is solid. As you sow, so you reap. So we can choose to, you see, the moon is a reflection of the sun's light. And so therefore, the mind is a reflection of the original light of intelligence, which is the Supreme Self. And so the moon represents the world of ancestors, or the world of our life. We led a good life, but it was not a liberating life, and we have to come back and learn the lessons. And we have the great opportunity of having infinite lessons, as many as we like. But of course, every lesson has pain that goes with it. It's much better to do away with it and get our freedom. Freedom from primarily restriction, slavery, and pain. Consequence of it is pain. So we follow the path of the sun. That's the analogy of it. Instead of the path of the moon, we follow the path that goes toward the highest moments of light, that move toward the if you like, the joy and of summer rather than the cold and darkness of winter. We go toward the longer days in the analogy, and we go away from the shorter days. That's the analogy that is produced. That's what we mean by it. Well, I think we can, yes. Oh, one more question is there?
Yes. I was going to ask you, Swami, how do you know you're not going to the shorter days?
Well, I don't, and I don't worry about it, because as soon as you start worrying about it or analyzing it, you've lost this present moment to put in a sacred thought. And the sacred thought is a liberating thought. It's like running a race. As soon as you look at your competition, then somebody else will overtake you. 100-yard race. Don't look where your neighbor is. Concentrate on your own running, please. So the more concentrated you are, the more successful you are. Concentration means a shortening of the time period from going from A to B, getting from A to B, or understanding the difference between A and B. Concentration is a way of acting as a catalyst. So concentration shortens the time period. And true concentration is defined as the absence of the sense of time. When you don't have any sense of time, either for the future or the past, this is concentration. If you worry about where you're going, you see, supposing you are climbing a mountain and you are absent-mindedly fall into a crevasse because you're anxious about the top. You're always thinking about the top, forgetting that there are crevasses either side. And it is only through concentration. Yes, there's a top, no doubt. Leave it there. It'll be there when you arrive, and it's there when you're going as well. But it's much better to look out for all the dangers and the crevasses and watch out. Watch out for the obstacles and learn how to get around them. That's the most important thing. Forget about where you're destined for. That's up to you. That's up to your current thought now and the next now and the next now and the next now. Well, if there are no more questions, I'm happy to leave it there. And so I wish you all a very, very happy and wonderful Christmas and sacred Christmas as an opportunity for you to tune the mind in to that aspect of devotional activity that considers the Supreme as a child and you, therefore, as a parent, giving the child, therefore, all the attention that can be given, and to contemplate the sacred events within Christianity and the overreaching significance, regardless of your religion, where the cosmic balancing power is born from age to age and gives a new turn to the world for the next few thousands of years. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Swamiji.
Swami.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Swamiji.
Swami. Thank you, Swami.
Good night, Swami.
Yes.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Om